Hey everybody, welcome back to Mike's Wooden Things and Stuff, and welcome to Joinery Cabinet, I'm calling it. Basically, if you watched the shop tour video, the end of 2019 shop tour video, you know that this cabinet is going over there, that cabinet's going away, pipe clamps are going to move over to join those pipe clamps, which leaves a spot open here for another cabinet that I am deciding to make into a joinery cabinet, which is basically moving all the stuff from the tool wall that isn't a saw or a plane into there. So it's all the marking gauges, chisels, measuring devices, squares, etc. All of that's going to go into sort of a shallow cabinet, maybe 5-6 inches deep. Mallets go over there too. With some doors. The firsts, this is going to be firsts again on this one. First solid wood case construction. I'm going to pull down some Douglas fir, and I'm going to make this cabinet out of Douglas fir. First dovetails. Oh, dun dun dun. First frame and panel doors, and first drawers. Actually, a lot of firsts going to be happening in this one, but it's fine, because it's a shop project. So this is a good place to try new things going on the wall of the shop, because why not, right? Why not try new things on shop projects? So, joinery cabinet. Let's get some Douglas fir down. I'll start milling. Woo! A lot of firsts. Here we go. All right, so let's get something down on paper here so we can figure out exactly, because it's only in my head right now. So we've got a dovetailed case. Looks something like that. Dovetails at all 4 of these corners. And then we're gonna have a partition like that, shelf-ish type thing. And then another one kind of offset on the bottom, so big drawer, little drawer, because I think that looks okay. And then up in this section, we've got frame and panel doors. Like that. So that's the idea. And the dimensions of the whole thing are going to be based, funny enough, on this panel right here being big enough so that on the inside of it, it'll fit my TS24 hanging on the inside of that panel when it opens up. So that's what we're working on. Let's figure out some actual dimensions and get milling. Okay, so we start taking measurements based on the TS24. Marked, I think I estimated about 2.5 inch rails and stiles, 3/4 of an inch pieces, and turned out that final dimensions that I needed were, I think, 40 by 41 or something like that. And I just decided to make the whole thing square instead, because I knew that if I was going to make the opposite sides the same but 1 inch different than each other, that would end up screwing me up in the long run. So I think I just made the whole thing 41 by 41 or 41.5 by 41.5 or something. And we start getting everything all milled down and straight and square, and the depth of the case I decided would be the thickest I could get everything milled to. Or the widest, I guess, that I could get everything milled to. So ended up being about, I want to say, 8 inches deep, something like that, which will be plenty. And then I mark out the preference for which ones I wanted on the side and the best grain facing out and all that stuff, and I could get everything cut to length over on the table saw sled there, and get to starting to cut my first ever dovetails. Start by getting the depth of well, the width of the board to transfer onto the opposing board with my marking gauge. And I could scribe that line, and then I could use the trick I learned from Matt Cremona and make a little wedge from a bandsaw, so that you can make one cut, flip the board over, and make a perfectly symmetrical cut the other way at the angle that you need your dovetails to be. So this is, we're cutting the tails first. Start with the outside, I guess that's a half pin. I don't really know all the terminology yet. We're cutting the space for the half pin, and then we can go approximate the middle and do it incorrectly the first time. So you end up with a V cutout instead of a dovetail. You'll see in a second here. But then I can just bump the fence over and recut them, because you're gonna have to, because that is not, that doesn't make a tail. That makes a V. So we reset the fence, and then we can do all of the boards so that all of the tails end up exactly the same. Which really isn't that important, because you're going to transfer those marks to the pin board later on each individual joint, but it makes for a nice symmetrical and consistent look, I guess, and it makes the cutting of them really easy. Then we can hog away the majority of the rest of the waste over on the bandsaw still, before we go over and start working with our hand tools over on the bench. So that's what's next, but first we need to sharpen some chisels. So I sharpened up my 1/4 inch and my 3/8 and my 1 inch, because I wanted to have a few sharp, and I didn't know what sizes I was going to need to get into where and all that stuff. But then we start chiseling away the waste, go halfway from one side, and then flip it over and go the other half the other way. Just based on how I've seen other people doing it, this seems like a pretty typical way to do it. So, and then I still didn't trust myself not to screw this up, even though everything was marked left, right, top, bottom, and the front of the cabinet was marked on each board. I still wanted to mark each individual joint, because yeah, I could still screw that up. I promise. And then we can get to transferring the tails onto the pin boards and start cutting out pins. And this is, I'll leave a link to my video making this Moxon vise. It's turning out to be a pretty handy thing to have in the shop. And we can get cutting, but first, oh yeah, mark out the waste sides, dummy, because otherwise you'll cut on the wrong side of the line, like you did on the first one. I'll show you, there'll be a close-up in a little bit here of my first dovetail. Was this the first? No, I think that was the second one that I was cutting there. And then again, I hog out the majority of the waste over on the bandsaw, first by cutting down the side of the pin that isn't, okay, so the side that's wider, you have that facing up when you're on the bandsaw so that you don't accidentally cut into your pin. And then get paring everything down, make it fit nice and snug, just little bits at a time. Get the little sanding file thing out, and just trial and error, see where it's tight and where it's not fitting until it slides together. Yay, look, I have a dovetail, like a whole joint that fits. And this is, I mean, okay, that's not super awesome compared to some craftsmanship, but I was pretty happy with how it was coming together at this point. And then once I got it all dry fit, I marked along all of the back edges to make sure that I didn't screw that up when I was cutting the groove for the back panel. Measure the spacing of what I'm going to be using for the French cleat on the back with my router. 1/4 inch router bit in there to correspond with my 1/4 inch back panel, and then I can start cutting the grooves around all those sides for the back panels. You can go with all the way through the piece on the what is that, the pin boards, and then you got to stop short on the tail boards so that they don't show through on the outside of the case. And once those are all cut, I can mark my back panel and get that cut. Unfortunately, I don't have enough capacity on my table saw to cut the outside of the piece, so I had to cut off the waste and in doing that I somehow screwed it up and cut the whole thing about a 1/4 inch too short all the way around. So here's me getting back from the lumberyard with some new pieces of 1/4 inch plywood for the back panel. And I'm actually pretty happy in the end that I ended up doing that, because I went and got some red oak 1/4 inch ply instead of that pine stuff from the home center, and it ended up looking way better. And all I had to do was cut the piece a 1/4 inch bigger than the last one, and yeah, it all went together. Here's the first dry fit of the Carcass, just the outside anyway, and it all comes together and the back panel fits, and yeah, pretty happy about it. So I could do what essentially amounts to a final sanding on the back panel, and then I can get to cutting the similar grooves for the partition pieces that are going to be mortise and tenoned into the sides, and the divider for the drawers. I'll do the sides first, and basically just go through to the groove for the back panel and leave it about a 1/2 inch shy of the front, because I'm going to haunch that tenon later. And then we can start cutting away. This is just to get the fit of the tenon, to get the height of the blade raised up to the right height so that the tenon is nice and snug. And then we can get to cutting the actual tenons and getting the shoulder to shoulder distance. After we've got one tenon cut on the end, we can start sneaking up on the shoulder to shoulder for the once. Yeah, there we go. Yeah, nice and tight. And then we measure the depth of the mortise, and we can start sneaking up on the depth of the tenon until it meets the caliper. And then we can see how far I stopped short of the front, measure that with the combination square, and transfer it over to the tenon so that we can haunch that with a handsaw. I'm not sure if that might be a tenon saw. One of my Veritas guys. And then we can clean it up with a chisel. I didn't round over the end of the tenon, in case you're wondering, because I didn't think it was necessary. This is, it'll be plenty strong without that. And then we do the same thing, exactly the same process on the bottom outside piece and the partition piece for the drawer divider. And once that's all done, we can do a final sanding on the inside of all the pieces. I think I just went up to 150 or 180 or something on the inside, because this is a tool cabinet. Yeah. And here we go. Get the epoxy mixed, and so there, yeah, it was a heck of a glue up. One of my more complicated glue ups probably. But it all went relatively smoothly. This is probably the 5th time that I'd put it together and taken it apart, so yeah, by that point, once you've dry fit something 5 times along the process, the glue up should probably go pretty easy. And then we can take down the cabinet that was on that wall, and because it's going across the way to the other side, and take off everything else that is in that space that I need for the new cabinet, pipe clamp rack and the little sign and everything else. We can clear out the unit that's on the other side of the building that's gonna have the other old cabinet in it. Eventually everything in my shop will be made by me, I'm sure it will, because I'm slowly replacing all of the mass-produced things with stuff that I make. Reinstall the French cleat for the other cabinet, get it up on the wall. And now, with the wide open space that I've got for the new cabinet, I can get the French cleat installed over there. I'll leave a link to something, the golf club display box thing. I talked about how to make a French cleat, so I'll put a link to that. And then the inaugural hanging of the cabinet, well, the Carcass anyway. First hanging of it on the wall. I was pretty nervous that it wasn't going to grab onto the French cleat, but it all went as planned, and it's nice and secure, and there we go. Well, the cabinet is complete, and the cabinet part of the cabinet is complete, and it's up on the wall and out of my way, And that's where I'm going to end this one. We'll do a part 2 where I make doors and drawers for it. For now, I just wanted it the hell out of my way. All right, that's all for this one. Thanks for watching. See you next time when we're probably putting some doors and drawers. Doors and drawers is fun to say. I like it. Came out pretty good so far. Hopefully I don't screw it up when I try to put doors and drawers in it. Whew. Yeah. I'm gonna have a beer. Bye for now.